Hey, hey, ho, ho, welcome to the show. Hey, 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 ho, ho, welcome. Alright.
Oh, for f***'s sake.
CinemaSins, who I think suck ass. I think they're crap. I don't think they're funny. At least in the past, I got chuckles out of some of them, but then I'm like, wait a minute, some of the humor is just confusing, perplexing, or doesn't make any lick of sense. And people are like, well, they don't even believe what they're saying. So if they don't believe what they're saying and I don't think it's that funny, then the fucking whole thing was pointless then.
This movie exists.
Let me paint you a picture of the far gone days of YouTube 2013. Animated storytime channels didn't exist. Commentary channels were nothing but the glimmer in a young Leafy's eye, and one genre reigned supreme. Movie review channels. Or more broadly, review channels in general. We have Jontrons, Pro Jareds, Nostalgia Critic Reuploads. Everywhere and anywhere you look, someone is trying to review someone else's hard work. Generally, these channels existed on a spectrum. We have the goofers, like Jontron and the Normal Boots gang, who focus on being entertaining while providing a relatively small amount of actual criticism. And then we have the gaffers, who focus more on giving their actual thoughts, people like Jeremy Johns and Chris Duckman. Now, whether on the funnies or the dunnies side of the aisle, each channel followed a relatively simple format. 1. Watch or play the media. 2. Collect thoughts. 3. Make video. That is until a little channel called CinemaSins came along, designed to skip steps 1 and 2 by just going through the entire movie in Premiere, putting markers on where they want to make the funny quips, sort of like Mystery Science Theater 3000, except without the quirky sidekicks and lovable protagonist. Instead, we have a disembodied voice listing off random things about a movie in a semi-sarcastic tone while text at the bottom of the screen spells out what the voice just said and a timer ticks up coinciding with how long the voice has been speaking. Most quips boil down to,
"This scene has a weird looking clock in it."
And,
"This scene has a large semi-opaque watermelon over top of it."
But some went a little more personal, such as when they talked about how much they absolutely hated Emma Stone's disgusting fish face. Understandable, she does have a strange looking face, but I didn't understand what it had to do with the film adaptation of The Last Airbender. Small quips and quaps like these slowly grew with CinemaSins' popularity into larger critiques of directors and plots, and the videos grew longer as well, with Everything Wrong with Hunger Games in 3 minutes or less, turning into Everything Wrong with 310 minutes or less. Nowadays, they've had to drop the whole in X minutes or less thing altogether, because telling people everything wrong with Gone in 60 seconds within 16 minutes just doesn't seem as impressive. Soon, they became so popular that they can no longer only worry about the fans of these movies making Twitter threads saying how mean their quips are, but directors making Twitter threads saying how mean their quips are. Things start to get intense with the release of their video on Kong, Skull Island, when director Jordan Vogt Roberts took aim and fired at the team for making such harmful quips as
Creature pick interdicts specifics about the South Pacific.
And
as you can see from the pictures, it's a ceaseless void where time and space do not exist. You can also see some of God's power tools strewn about.
CinemaSins saw these intense critiques and thought up a thought-filled reply to the controversy.
"Hey everyone, I stepped away from the computer for a few hours to run errands and stuff. Did I miss anything?"
The day was saved! Yay! Woo! CinemaSins brought their reputation from the jaws of disdain, and no one ever disliked them again. That was until 12 seconds later when Bob, Sean, and pretty much everyone else who dislikes CinemaSins continued to dislike him and continued to make videos saying how much they dislike him. Sad days were upon CinemaSins. And by sad, I mean pretty neutral, because their fanbase continued to go strong and their videos continued to be popular for the foreseeable future. That being said, with the rise of channels criticizing or outright competing against CinemaSins, it wouldn't be unreasonable to say that CinemaSins has gained a bit of notoriety in the YouTube sphere. I mean, just mention the name and you'll get some pretty graphic responses. So what could have caused all this? What makes a channel that seems so loved and respected on the surface a target for such intense disdain? Well, folks, that's what I'm here to find out. Well, it probably wouldn't be surprising to know that CinemaSins wasn't always a topic of distaste for the YouTube sphere. Unlike other channels I've talked about, such as Spetchy and Enter, it took a good while for people to start thinking their proverbial content soup has gotten a bit sour. This isn't anything new for content creators. Tastes and palates change with time, and what was once a sweet, crisp slice of content could quickly become stale and inedible if not nurtured. However, in CinemaSins' case, there's a dramatic shift in tone and video style that could have accelerated the aging process. But let's go back, shall we? The transition slide said the good old days, and I've just been waffling on about food analogies. Let's take a look at some of the content that got Jeremy and the boys where they are today. First, we have the video that started it all. Everything wrong with Amazing Spider-Man in 2 minutes or less. A clear distinction from later videos, which can sometimes reach the 20-minute mark, though this could easily be explained as the team wanting to give more well-thought-out critique, requiring them to elaborate more. The video itself feels extremely lighthearted, as if Jeremy himself is winking at the camera as he points out sins such as
Peter Parker uses Bing,
and
unsettling scalp sniffing fetish.
every sin is kept to a length of 1 sentence, which not only helps the video feel quicker, but also helps with the comedy, as much of the humor comes from the illogical way they present these sins. Having Jeremy go into detail about what doesn't make sense or why something is a problem takes away from that. For CinemaSins fans, what are the reoccurring sins that pop into your head when you think of the channel? Is it
Mr. Limp will do our job for us in a second, but him. It's amazing the tea isn't ice cold, considering you've been on the water for so long it took this animated dolly shot 7 seconds to get to where you are. Your complaint about the tepid tea is weak tea, sir.
or is it
Completely frozen.
Roll credits.
Well, not every word you say can be plastered on a slab for generations to mimic. Obviously, some quotes are going to be more recognizable than others. What does this even matter?
Well, dear viewer, it really doesn't. I felt that it was indicative of the ideological change that happened within the Cinemaverse, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go to another early video. Everything wrong with Looper in 3 minutes or less should do nicely. Here we see a bit more biting sins, such as when he says,
Any movie that opens with 3 minutes of first-person narration definitely skipped the first day of Screenwriting 101.
and when he was critiquing the movie's plot points, such as,
Just because Future Joe is delaying his departure from the future doesn't mean that his arrival to a specific time in the past would be altered one bit.
However, most things tend to stay pretty fun, with scenes such as when he points out that the movie does indeed contain a lap dance, and when he sends the movie for soy steak. It also almost seemed to have a theme to it in a way, because there was a point where he gave out 6 sins in the same breath when talking about the strange ending, only to end with the final sin being that he thinks the kid will still grow up to be an asshole. Since Looper is known to have a crazy ending, the video could have been themed around what would happen if a guy like CinemaSins talked about a complex time travel flick. Overall though, the video was still just a tongue-in-cheek goofing on movies kind of thing. You know, par for the course for CinemaSins at this point. Well then, why'd I choose this video, you may ask? Well, the director wasn't super keen on the video CinemaSins put out.
Hi CinemaSins, it's me, acclaimed director Rian Johnson, here to tell you that I don't like your video on my movie. Okay, I'll shush.
This is the first time CinemaSins dealt with such heat. How would they respond? Their reputation was in jeopardy! Oh wait, they responded extremely well and actually fostered a decent relationship with the director. Man, it's almost as if YouTubers start off being able to take criticism really well, and then get worse at it as they get larger. I digress though. This response quelled the fire pretty quickly, and everyone came out looking better than when they came in. CinemaSins look like they don't take themselves too seriously, Ryan looks like he's a down-to-earth guy and gives CinemaSins some leeway once he sees they're not looking for an argument, and the videos look like they're just lighthearted romps on any and all movies, even ones that the team enjoys. Finally, I'd like to capstone this section with a video that, in my opinion, perfectly illustrates CinemaSins' mindset at this point in their YouTube career. Everything wrong with CinemaSins in 3 minutes or less. This was a big video for the channel. It's currently their most popular. It was their channel trailer for about 6 years until it was replaced 3 months ago. And it was the first time viewers of the channel ever learned anything at all about the guys behind the videos. Interesting facts like how they're white, they've collectively worked 30 years in a movie theater, and how at least one of the gang reads children's literature to a dominatrix in a sex dungeon. Yeah, clearly from these facts you can tell this video is mostly goofs and giggles at themselves, even sinning themselves for being idiots, the narrator having an annoying voice, and the sins not having any real value. An interesting point in the video, however, is the scene where they point out sins and mistakes in their own videos. They then say that they wear these mistakes like a badge of honor because
That's the motherfucking point.
which can be interpreted in a few different ways, which I think was intentional. 1. Movies in all forms of media should be proud of the mistakes they make because that shows the humanity within the media. 2. Showing off sins in a movie is done only to show that everything created has some form of mistakes in them. And 3, we like to show mistakes in movies, so we like to show mistakes in our own creations as well, for the sake of fairness. Something I think people don't get when criticizing CinemaSins for what they do, is that the point of the videos aren't to criticize movies. It isn't even to riff movies, such as in the likes of Nostalgia Critic or MST3K. It literally is supposed to be tongue-in-cheek pointing out things in movies that 90% of the time don't make sense. It's making fun of that friend you have, who thinks that scene in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 where Gamora and Nebula find a pile of bones underground ruins the movie, because why would he go store all the bones underground if he's a god and can just make them disappear? It's making fun of that guy in the theater, who thinks he's the smartest guy in the audience because he found the lights in Batman's weapon room in The Dark Knight to be impractical. It's making fun of all the people that everyone getting mad at CinemaSins thinks CinemaSins actually is. And yes, Vogue droppers, that means CinemaSins is actually, by definition, satire. Or at least it was satire before. One thing that was strange to me when asking Twitter about what they thought about CinemaSins was how many people said,
CinemaSins used to provide good, solid critiques. Now that's just nonsense and dumb stuff.
when I think the exact opposite is true. Let me ask all you audience something. Why do you think CinemaSins videos got longer? Sure, you could say it was just to help the videos in the algorithm, but what I mean is, what exactly did they do to the videos to make them longer? Why can they point out all the flaws in Skyfall within 4 minutes, but for Tangled it takes 14? Well, because they never did point out all the flaws in Skyfall. They just goofed around about how the motorcycle physics were funny, and how the place looks like Taken for 4 minutes. When they start to make their videos longer, they have to fill it up with more content. And there are only so many times you can point out a disappearing handbag or an illogical decision by the characters before the sins start to run out. So they had to start doing the unthinkable. Giving actual criticisms. This is where things start to go awry, folks. When you have a channel that was set up for satirical purposes trying to do a less satirical version of the thing they're satirizing, the lines start to get a little blurred, and before you know it, you're robbing the audience of their thickened perspective regarding your content. How can you take this criticism of a character's motivations in one scene seriously when 3 sins ago you were talking about how a logo went on for 3 seconds too long? It's almost as if I were to make a parody video of those goofy anti-feminist skeptic channels, and in the middle of it I would go over the problems with how the widely believed wage gap was calculated, only to go back to shouting about SJWs in an intense and blatantly comedic way. Was the part where I talked about the wage gap supposed to be satire as well, or is everything around it supposed to be taken seriously? This is where people get confused with CinemaSins, even mentioning it in their Everything Wrong with CinemaSins Volume 2, where they say,
They put jokes right alongside with real critiques. Hello, math much?
speaking of which, let's take a look at that Everything Wrong with CinemaSins Volume 2 video and compare it to the first one. If you remember, the first Everything Wrong With was very self-deprecating and full of stuff like,
We don't live in our mother's basements because we don't deserve such luxury.
and
People who tell us to get a life are correct because we lost our souls long ago.
this one takes a completely different route, almost acting as if they're one of CinemaSins' actual critics, and are passive-aggressively listing off complaints that they have. The tone is actually pretty mean-spirited, not just because they are not so subtly complaining about all their critics on YouTube, but rather due to the arrogant way they present each sin. Now granted, at the end of the last one they did have a section for every fanboy they pissed off, but at least one of the sins wasn't them complaining about having 13,000 channels on YouTube explaining how much they suck, without a hint of irony. Another problem with the newer video is that they actively try to defend their own criticism of movies, bringing up stuff like how they've interviewed people in the industry, how one of their people on their team is a verified critic on Rotten Tomatoes, and even changing the mantra of,
We're not reviewers or assholes.
to,
So I guess we're both critics and assholes.
this is basically the team confirming to us that this channel is no longer the satirical deconstruction of how know-it-alls nitpick movies, but rather a cynical movie critic who riffs on movies. As if we didn't have enough of those! To top it off, they do a little bragging, and the video ends. Okay, so overall comparisons, we have the original, which was blatantly self-deprecatory to extremes, with stuff like saying they lost their souls years ago and that they don't deserve the luxury of living in their mother's basement, with some funny exaggerations such as sins for them being white and American, confirming that the channel is basically supposed to be a guy arbitrarily nitpicking movies and plots in a sarcastic tone. Then we have the new one, which is extremely passive-aggressive towards criticism that they receive, points out things that people say as criticism and just saying it in a snarky voice to dismiss it, tries to give credibility to their criticism of movies by pointing out that they've made friends in the industry and how they have an actual critic on the team, and finally confirming that CinemaSins is to be taken seriously at some points, but not seriously at others, so that they can keep all the accolades of being a movie critic with none of the responsibility. But why did this happen? I mean, we talked about them making the videos longer to help them fare better in the algorithm, and we talked about them filling that extra time with actual movie critiques, but that doesn't mean they have to change the entire purpose of their videos, does it? Remember back in the beginning of this video where I said, "Man, it's almost as if YouTubers start off being able to take criticism really well and then get worse at it as they get larger." Well, that's most likely because when YouTubers become larger, they start to get a bit of an ego and stop thinking that the underlings who critique them have anything valuable to say. Well, this can go in an especially bad direction when you have a tongue-in-cheek riffing channel that makes fun of movies. You can start to think that you have an actual impact on the media and don't want to waste it making goofy lap dance jokes. You can start to think that your channel is meant for something more. You can start to think that you were meant for something more. Then before you know it, you're making strange review videos that aren't sarcastic enough to be classified as satire, but not substantial enough to be a review. So it looks like we're back on a spectrum again. But due to the nature of CinemaSins' format, it's more of a binary. Substantial critiques or funny goofs. Passive aggressive or self-deprecating. I want to be taken seriously or I want to be a satire of moviegoers. One or the other, no in between. The people who rally against CinemaSins see this in more of a malicious way, with the group meticulously crafting videos that cater to the lowest common denominator in order to get more views, but I don't think it's as cut and dry as that. I think that Jeremy and Chris always wanted to do more of a movie critique thing in the long run, but the success of the CinemaSins format proved too fruitful. I mean, just taking a look at all the different series done on the CinemaSins Jeremy Scott channel shows that he didn't just want to make Sins videos. Take a look at the snippet of an interview Jeremy did with Dave Paulson of the Tennessean regarding the popularity of his content.
For some, CinemaSins creativity is up for debate. Screenwriter Damon Lindelof says that the channel is popular for ripping apart something that everyone loves instead of creating something.
That's just the way that talent gets discovered in this digital era. You find a cultural touchstone to talk about in a new medium, and you hopefully display your own talent in doing that, and you find a platform to show off your own original creation.
This interview was taken right around the release of Jeremy's book, The Ables, which has been a project he's been focusing on for quite a while, perhaps using that to fulfill a creativity-shaped hole lodged deep within his chest. But probably not because he made that book before CinemaSins was even a concept, so. Let's not overlook the second channel, though. Filled to the brim with frequently updated content that really tickles those proverbial creativity elbows. Oh. Well, I mean, obviously this is just a second personal channel. You know, nothing he would actually upload a bunch of content to. Oh. Huh. Wonder what happened with that. Hey, let's talk about their little spat with Screen Junkies for a bit.
It's not easy to come up with video concepts. Even for a channel like CinemaSins, the main channel.
The drama starts in 2015. The issues between two movie review channels. Reviewing movies and cars is a dumb idea. This title. Product placement. 13 minutes and 44 seconds of a guy breathing heavy, clearing his throat and pausing between
Like
sentences.
CinemaSins, the main channel. History.
Our
main channel videos are laden with sarcasm and over-the-top nitpickiness, and it's not really true film criticism.
CinemaSins isn't true film criticism.
We talked early on about maybe doing something in a diner or a coffee shop, but ultimately it seemed like that would be too noisy. And there's no more immediate moment. We talk about a movie than in the car, on the way there and on the way home. And
talking about movies unscripted immediately after you've seen them is a dumb idea.
And allow me and my friends.
Friends.
It's especially frustrating because we have gone out of our way on a number of occasions to be of benefit to them, to be of use to them.
Screen Junkies sounds like the 1930s Italian mafia.
When I made a Dear Hollywood called How to Fix the Horror Genre.
That video is gone now. Sluggish keyframing.
Should not lead to this kind of video, probably at all, but at least not without me knowing about it or giving my blessing or something. I don't know.
CinemaSins sounds like the 1930s Italian mafia.
I'm busy. You're busy. Everybody's busy. I don't watch a lot of Screen Junkies videos.
Passive-aggressive insults.
And that's not acceptable to me. It's also illogical.
Unacceptable and illogical used within 10 words of each other.
It may or may not be important to note that Screen Junkies is owned by Defy Media.
That company doesn't exist anymore.
You know about it now.
A 7-second pause.
And you know, what did we do when we found that Couch Tomato kid?
Couch Tomato is a dumb name.
If I really wanted to whine.
If I really wanted to whine after 12 minutes of whining.
I guess you probably won't see me on Movie Fights anymore.
He was only on Movie Fights once. A 10-second pause only to be followed by the outro. Twitter. The review crew doesn't exist anymore. Jeremy's car reviews don't exist anymore. All tweets and videos regarding the controversy don't exist anymore. Some weird website made an article about this. This website makes articles exclusively on internet drama. The drama doesn't end with both parties making out.
Hey, ho. Welcome to the show.
Well, that was a fun change of pace, right guys? Anyway, Jeremy was looking to use CinemaSins as a way to move on to something more substantial, but when CinemaSins turned from a jumping off point to a crutch, he and the team decided to change how the videos were made. Most of the controversies CinemaSins get into happened during this period as well, such as the Screen Junkies issue, which we already discussed, and the Vogue Roberts controversy. Now, normally I would compare this to the Rian Johnson call-out controversy, but I think they're extremely different situations. If you remember, Rian was very passive and almost standoffish, like he didn't want to make too big of a deal out of it. So naturally, CinemaSins responded calmly as well, and the whole thing was resolved beautifully. However, Vogue Roberts went on a huge Twitter thread directly calling everything CinemaSins does bad for the industry, and pointing out specific examples with full intention to cause an uproar against the channel. If Jeremy responded such as he did with the Rian Johnson controversy, they would seem like soft-faced baby boys who roll over when faced with criticism from a big director. Obviously, no one wants to be a soft-faced baby boy, so that idea is pretty much out the window. But if you remember from the beginning of my video, his actual response wasn't much better. If only there were another person who had a vehement disliking of their work, and who CinemaSins had an interaction with that ended up quelling the controversies. Oh, who could forget famous Prometheus director Damon Lindelof? In March of 2013, Damon sent a hot take CinemaSins way. Pretty standard stuff, they've probably seen stuff like this before.
I'm gonna get a lot of attention for myself by ripping apart something that everybody loved instead of making something myself.
But clearly this guy had a lot of disdain for CinemaSins and wasn't looking to understand what they're doing. He just wanted to point and yell at them for being mean to his movie. A Rian Johnson reply wouldn't work here either, so they had to take on a whole new strategy. If Damon is going to yell at us, obviously taking our video very seriously, then we're going to respond in a way that restates that this channel is all about goofs and is not to be taken seriously in any way.
We don't just make fun of movies everyone loved. We also made fun of Prometheus.
Bam! A knockout! The argument is resolved, and Lindelof looks like an idiot while CinemaSins looks like the cool guy alley-oopers for their roasty response. Some may disagree with how CinemaSins handled this. I mean, generally if you want to stay out of conflict, you shouldn't try to one-up the other guy, and should try to respond to diffuse the situation. But when you have a prominent guy you should know way better than just to yell at some random YouTubers, then you're well within your right to respond a little snarkily. And if you do it right, you can avoid further uprisings in the future. That being said though, I don't think just that would have been a good response to the Vogue Roberts controversy. It's extremely in-depth with how much he hates CinemaSins, and you can't really do a witty comeback to something that big. I think they were on a pretty good wavelength with the original response, but they didn't go hard enough. Just acting as if you don't know what's going on isn't enough, and can make it seem like you're trying to passively avoid that hate, instead of actually addressing it. That being said, I don't think addressing it outright would have been the best call either. I think a mix of the snarky response and devaluing the situation would have been the best call. Something like tweeting about something completely unrelated, and replying to it.
In other news, the director of King Kong hates us.
It's a really touchy call though, one that most YouTubers don't have to go through. I mean, think about if you made videos on video games, and a mid-tier developer just went on a Twitter rant directly about how terrible your specific videos are for the gaming industry. But considering most critics of CinemaSins directly reference the Vogue Roberts stuff when talking about how bad the channel is, I think it's fair to say it wasn't the best outcome for our critic. I think he would have handled this better back in the day though, when he really thought of his channel as nothing to be taken seriously. He most likely would have garnered more sympathy not just because he was a smaller channel, but because it's really hard to imagine someone taking his old videos seriously as legitimate critiques. And so it would seem like a big old director getting mad at a guy for making fun of his movie. Back when it happened though, many actually saw Vogue Roberts as the underdog, and him standing up for his movie against the big evil mean CinemaSins who insults movies and makes people feel bad. Grr! Not sarcastic enough to be a parody, not insightful enough to be a critique. But Connor, you all say, surely going back to the strange old format he did back in the day can't be the answer. Can't he just learn to be more insightful? What would that look like? Well, I can think of one thing. It would not look like, because CinemaSins and CinemaWins exist for extremely different purposes, and no matter what CinemaSins does, it will not be regarded as highly as CinemaWins, because the premise of pointing out mistakes in a movie will always seem cooler than pointing out what works in a movie, and it takes more insight to point out what works and state it well rather than sitting on the sidelines and pointing out things that don't. While CinemaWins is a great channel and obviously a direct offshoot of CinemaSins, it's unfair to compare the two since they strive to accomplish extremely different goals. CinemaSins is a YouTube channel. A YouTube channel with hopes and dreams just like you or me. But with those hopes and dreams come a price. The price of success. that drive you to either stick to a vision you never intended or put all your eggs in a single basket. In CinemaSins' case, it drove them to do both, changing their content to adhere to YouTube standards and changing it to fulfill what the creators wanted to accomplish afterward. But a video style can only change so much before it becomes a shadow of its former self. What was once a fun satire on the film-going public is now a strange mix of off-the-wall humor and mild critiques of complex films that sometimes miss the mark entirely. Too sarcastic to be serious, too serious to be satire. So, why do we all hate CinemaSins? Well, in short, we don't. We may hate what CinemaSins became, or some figment of what we think CinemaSins is in our head, but what I want to get across in all these long scripted videos is that the image people paint of these creators is generally built upon presumptions, and the idea that we know what these people are thinking, what their intentions are, what their motivations are. But in CinemaSins' case, the intentions and motivations aren't what's changed. It was the world around them. And you certainly can't hate someone for that. Thank you all so much for watching, love you all smooches, and I will see all you in the next video. Goodbye.
Yeah, some days I feel unfazed, like when I'm with my friends with a cup raised. Come Monday, I got a gun raised, suicidal do or die until hump day. Then I go right back at it like an automatic. More drinks, more songs, more beats to rap. I need a shrink, I'm gone, more time keeps passing. No watch, no thoughts at all.